Hey there guys, it's Metro, and this video is going to be a review about the upcoming World of Warcraft expansion known as Legion. This review is going to be from a player's perspective, so we're mostly going to talk about features within the expansion and how they contribute to the game overall. At the end, we will summarize all of these topics and also explain who I think is the appropriate audience for this expansion, who should and should not buy, and specifically whether you should and should not buy. For the people who have already purchased the expansion or intend to do so without any subsequent material, this video will be helpful to you because I will be listing pretty much all the major features, giving a little bit of a run through of them, why they're important, why they're not, why they're good, why they're bad. So you might be able to learn something there as well. I probably will miss something, so make sure if I do, you put it down in the comment section below and I will reply to you personally and tell you my opinions on it and whether or not it's applicable to your interest in the game. But let's get started, shall we? First thing we're going to talk about on this list is artifacts and artifact power thusly. Now, for those of you who don't understand, basically what they've done is given every spec in the game, not just class, a very, very powerful relic from some, great warrior or something like that from the entire history. A lot of them have been made up kind of for this expansion, but there are a lot of great ones like Ashbringer. So the idea behind it alone, I give top rating to. I think it's amazing. It seems like a really, 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 really fun way to make our characters still find ways to progress in power even after all they've done. But the actual implementation is even better, if you ask me. This follows along the lines of artifact power, but if you're also not aware of this, you have a whole new talent tree, this artifact. This essentially functions as a response to all the people who said they wanted the classic talent tree type thing back. You have it back with the artifact, right? Now, while you're leveling from 100 to 110, you'll be gathering artifact power. There are, instead of, dinging a new level, like in the classic model, you ding a new level when you have enough artifact power to buy these traits. The cost of the artifact power goes up exponentially after a while. I think it's about like around 16 points put in. You start to get a really, really high cost. That is going to be stymied over time by adding something called artifact knowledge to the system, where you just gain more artifact power over time because you're researching ways, things about the weapon, etc. So you're becoming more efficient at it. This is a really good way to monitor, playing alts and make, in general, just gearing up a little bit smoother. Once you have enough artifact power, you can pick traits. There are 3 golden traits in the actual artifact itself that make a significant difference in your playstyle. They're mostly passives. I think there are 1 or 2 actual actives that are golden traits, but in general, they're passives, but they're so important that they will absolutely change the way you play your spec. The most impactful ones seem to be for tanks. The least impactful ones seem to be for healers and damage dealers. They kind of get like they feel more passive for me for a lot of damaging specs, but there's a lot of them that are still very applicable. So in general, I really, really like the artifact feature. There's also a lot of cosmetic reasons to like it. They all have different models, of course, and then within those models, there's skins for them. There are multiple skins available just on launch that you can get from various achievements. Completing raids, completing Mythic plus dungeons, completing PvP, different types of achievements for PvP. But there are also hidden artifact powers, which most are kind of being kept secret. People have figured them out in the beta, but either way, yeah, there's a lot of potential here and a lot of potential moving forward. So I think the artifact power and artifact in general is probably the strongest point of Legion. The next feature we're going to talk about here is the order halls, which go hand in hand with the artifacts, since you'll spend a lot of time in the order hall building your artifact. They're essentially a answer to Warlords of Draenor's garrison feature. They answer some of the issues pretty well, but some not so much. The main thing that we want to start with here is, of course, the mission table. I know a lot of people kind of dread this feature and dread that it's coming with us. I'll like to say this here, though. I agree with critics who say that, they probably should have just removed all sign of it because so many people were negatively opposed to it. But I would also like to remind you guys that this does not actually stop you from enjoying the game. It is not anything like it was in Warlords of Draenor. Luckily, in Warlords of Draenor, it was very much you were generating these fake creatures out of an inn to send on these gold missions for hours upon hours a day. You would literally log on 8 characters a day to do this, and it was like the best way you could basically earn anything, in the garrison especially. you were able to earn all these profession mats and all these different, and you were even able to get progression gear from it. All of that is no longer applicable in Legion, okay guys, but the mission table is still a little bit mandatory because you need it to upgrade your artifact properly, and the order hall upgrade path, and like all the quests kind of involve it. So yes, they are still kind of jamming it down your throat, quote unquote, but after you do that, that's the end of it. You don't have to use it again, at least to my knowledge. You don't have any reason to do it. There's no gear involved. There are some cool quests and, like a fox mount and stuff like this, but hopefully it feels like a much shorter and compact version, especially because there are far less missions that could even be sent out. You can only have 5 active followers at once, and all of these followers are typically something very, very potent in the actual universe. Like, for example, the monk you see has Terran Zoo and the Monkey King, right? Like a prolific character in the history of Warcraft. So yeah, honestly, I like that. I think that's the right answer. The Order Hall itself, I feel, answers a lot of questions that Garrison had. The Garrison obviously failed to implement a lot of the features they said they were going to fail. One of them was, of course, being able to pick where you want Garrison at. Now, while that is not necessarily happening in the Order Hall, I feel like the locations are very, very, very interesting. A lot of them. On top of that, there's a mixed bag here because some of them actually are really, I feel like they're really fake and not very well thought out. Like specifically the Warrior and the Rogue One, I think their locations are really poor. The Order Hall itself is functional and fine, but there's definitely a mixed bag for me on some of these Order Halls just simply being way, way better than other ones. In general, I think the feature itself is really cool. I like the concept of it. I just think, the cosmetics and the elements of it could be improved for some classes, but not all. I really like the Paladin one, so that's great. And the Monk one is probably my favorite in the game just because it's the Wandering Isle. So stuff like that, really shows the feature in its fullest. The other direct response that we got to the Warlord's failures were anybody who's a Paladin can see each other in this Order Hall. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work with the phasing tech that we've also had implemented in 7.0, but the actual Order Hall itself is going to be very alive with a lot of people. I think a lot of people didn't like that in the Garrison. I know I didn't. Some people actually preferred it, but regardless, it's an MMORPG, guys. I've already made some friends in the Order Hall talking about transmog and talking about artifact, different selection of artifact points. So I think this is a really good feature overall. It's very much a mixed bag for me. I'm not totally sold on it. Like in general, I think the Order Hall is going to be really great because, the way you work with it, the quests involving it send you out into the world a lot. And there's really nothing in there to kind of keep you there constantly. Like the Garrison, I feel like that was the big issue with the Garrison, was that one reason or another, you always felt like the Garrison was the place that you should be. Whereas now the Order Hall is actually a little bit out of the way as well. For a lot of classes, it's hard to get to. So I don't think anybody's just going to constantly be sitting in their Order Hall. And honestly, if you are, you're missing out on a lot of other things to do. Next on the list is World Quests, probably one of the marquee features of the expansion, something that I think a lot of people are underwriting, so I want to make sure we're clear on how it exactly works. It's essentially a marriage of the Timeless Isle concept introduced in MoP and, of course, dailies that have been here. And it really is a direct response to all the criticism of WoD that people said had absolutely no world content. And, they're right. They're 100% right about that. But you cannot make this claim ever again as long as world quests are in, guys. They are essentially randomized. They all have a different timer, a different duration, etc. But long story short, when you open your map, you are going to see a lot of different things to do. Now, some of them reward gold, some of them reward Order Hall resources, so those two things are kind of not as important, but there's a great source of artifact power, which we've already talked about, guys, an extremely important part of this expansion. So you will definitely be doing those. They are also a great source of pre-raid gear, guys, okay? The gear that you can get from World Quests scales with your item level. So for example, if you're very low item level, it'll drop 810. If once you're over 810, it'll start dropping higher, like 815, 820, 830, 835, etc. It'll keep going up to like probably 835 is probably the highest, but the point of the matter is that the idea behind it is actually really well implemented. It means that they can keep these things relevant forever, for literally ever, because no matter what the rewards are, they can scale with you. And then there's also these really cool PvP, like Battle Royale quests for World Quests as well, and they give PvP gear, and that PvP gear is increasing based on your PvP rating. We'll talk about that in later points, but all of these things tell me that this is probably one of the best systems they literally could ever implement. And I would love to see this out in the open world as well, outside of the current expansions content, but either way, I would love to see all the world quest scaling stuff happen in the old world too. I think that would be the dream, guys. So even if you don't really like this feature, or for some reason you don't think it's going to help you out, you have to recognize that this is probably the most progressive feature in the expansion, and probably one of the most progressive features in a long time. I think flex rating is probably number 2, but this is definitely number 1, guys. It's just really crazy. On top of the actual quests themselves, there's these emissaries that come. You'll see them on the bottom left of your map when you look at it. There are always 3 up. If you have done none, they last for a few days, I think is how it works. It's kind of like Hearthstone dailies. You can choose to do none of them and pull them for a couple days, but you get one every single day. So yeah, it's gonna be something that you don't have to like actually do every day. It's not an actual daily, but it is something that you need to do every 3 days, I guess. Otherwise, you're going to be missing some. The emissaries give rep with a specific faction. They're all tied to a specific faction. If I had to pick a drawback, I think it would be that it gets kind of repetitive. Like I have actually experienced this already, and it's funny to say this because it's just the beta, but I already log on and feel overwhelmed. So this is, like I said, a direct response to all the people out there who are like, "Lol, there's nothing to do in the game." Lol. Well, guess what, guys? That is no longer the case, and I don't see how you could ever say it is, because when you log on and see that there are like 6 world quests, if not 10, in every zone, it's like, oh my god, where do I even start? I wanted to do dungeons today, but I got to do all these world quests, So, yeah, there might be too much content with the world quest, but either way, I think the idea behind it is extremely, extremely valuable. Now we'll talk about the profession changes in Legion for a little bit. The actual idea behind it is to just make them all a lot more relevant. All right, you always now, pretty much every profession, I can't think of one that doesn't give some sort of like useful gear that you're going to actually be able to use. But on top of this, they did like a complete UI overhaul, as you see. It looks a lot better. It plays a lot better. It shows you, all the profession recipes and everything like that. So that is really, really, really cool. But I think the best feature about the profession changes is that the quests actually get you out into the world, right? This is a huge thing with this expansion. Between the order hall and professions, there are so many like just random dungeon items that you could find, like little books in dungeons and libraries in dungeons, even old zones like back in STV or other zones all around the world. There's stuff that you're going to be going to do for professions. Professions now are a lot more relevant. They're a lot more fun. They're actually a progression path. There's a new item called Obliterum, which allows you to upgrade your profession crafted gear. There is no longer a limit on how much profession crafted gear you can wear. So, you could even create a full set of really good profession crafted gear just from all of this effort. So it's really interesting to me. I've never been a huge fan of profession stuff. I always like actually going out to dungeons and raids and getting my gear. But yeah, now I think you can create a lot of really good gear. If somebody's really serious about professions, it will show. Now we'll talk about the class changes in Legion. A lot of people are really for and really against a lot of the changes they made. They're already live, 7.0 pre-patch. A lot of people have been testing it. But you need to understand that the classes are not complete until you have a full artifact trait, all the golden traits and everything at 110. But regardless, the playstyle has definitely been compacted. People are calling it the prune, quote unquote. But really what happened here is a lot of classes lost a lot of kind of like sideways situational buttons. Things like Dark Sim and Executes as Blood DKs. Like these things, you know what I mean? Like they didn't actually help you do your job in a lot of cases, but they were kind of cool to have. So most of that type of utility, those types of spells are gone. There are a lot of specs that have changed dramatically, all right? And then when they change dramatically, like their rotation is no longer, like the abilities they have did not exist before. So it's also pretty jarring for a lot of people. But the best advice I can give, guys, here is to actually be open-minded. I know it's very difficult. I know a lot of people just utterly dread change, and especially in a video game like this. I can promise you every single spec in the game, I've seen them all in action, and they're all more than viable, okay? Maybe they're not as fun for you anymore, but this is a decision that you need to make on your own here. You cannot blame Blizzard for this. You had way too much time to give your feedback on these changes. They did a lot of changes based on player feedback as well. But regardless of all that, I think the class changes overall are a positive. They're focusing a lot more on class fantasy, quote unquote. That seems to be the trend with this expansion. So they're giving a lot of classes a lot more unique things again, like, you know, paladins getting the greater blessings back, warriors being the only ones with like a strong raid CD, stuff like this. It's really interesting to me because they went so hard to homogenize all the specs for basically 2 expansions, but now they've kind of gone completely back on that. So it doesn't impress me that Blizzard is making these types of swings. That's how it goes. In terms of the actual classes, I don't feel like any of them play worse. I've played a lot of specs, a lot of classes, and the one thing that I can say is almost universal is that specs play faster. So even though you have less buttons, quote unquote, you know, not a lot of classes have less buttons, I suppose, but the point is that the buttons are now they have a lot greater impact. It is not in any way a bad thing for the expansion. I understand it is jarring, it may confuse you, it may be complicated, but in general, the classes and their rotations play much faster. Everything is a lot more reactionary now, and you can't really make as many mistakes as you could previously with rotations. But rotations should have never really been something that you were worried about. Playing the class at a high level is what you should be doing. You should not be caring about, oh, this rotation is really complex. Well, guess what? You're going to press those buttons thousands of times over the course of one night. So they better not be that complex, man. Otherwise, you're going to be making a lot of mistakes. So in general, I favor the changes. I understand a lot of people are against them because they fear change, but I think they're good for the game. I think the class fantasy stuff is really healthy. So one of the most glamorous changes in Legion is, of course, the addition of the Demon Hunter class. I think a lot of people saw this as the headliner here when they talked about Legion a few months ago, but I really do find myself a little bit disappointed with the class. Now, that's not to say it's bad in any way, but I had grander plans, and I think a lot of people would agree with me here. First of all, they only have 2 specs. This isn't something that really bothers me, but it does kind of feel like, yeah, they didn't actually know why they were implementing them, but they knew that they had a centralized theme that they wanted to follow. And that theme is actually really engaging. It is that of movement, all right? They have incredible amounts of movement. In fact, almost all of their abilities synergize in some way with movement. They also have the patented triple jump and then glide, so you can cover a lot of distance, and this really kind of changes the way people play the game. I really, really anticipate especially Demon Hunter tanks being in some situation where they are mandatory, and especially 5-mans because of their triple jump ability. I haven't actually seen it in play yet, but I would not be surprised if in some way it does end up occurring. So yeah, they kind of break the conventional rules of the video game, but in general, other than that, I feel like they're really bland. The tank spec is a lot cooler than the DPS spec, if you ask me. The DPS spec is, I don't know, it's been changed a lot since the beta started, so that's a good thing. At least they're kind of trying to iterate it a bit, but they just started off very basic. It didn't seem like it was going to be a lot of fun for me. So in general, I think the tank spec is probably a lot more diverse, has a lot more things you need to worry about. They're extremely active since all that mobility and stuff, like I said, is going to be a very big part of this expansion. Their activity levels are through the roof. It's really unbelievable, actually, how active they are. You really don't have time. Like, I find myself having my fingers hurt after like a few hours of gameplay with the Vengeance Demon Hunter. So it may be the same for Havoc, but very much a mixed bag for me. I'm not in love with the Demon Hunter. Like I said, I had grander plans. I had a different vision in my head, but I think the theme of just massive amounts of movement, you know, things like this spectral sight breaking stealth and the double jump with the glide, all of these things are really, really, really cool, actually. So I'm a little disappointed, but I do actually like what's here. It's just, it doesn't feel complete. So hopefully in 7.1 we'll see some nice little structural changes. They'll hammer out some of the flaws that Demon Hunter have, but as of right now, if you love a spec that has a lot of mobility, something that can travel the battlefield or the dungeon, whatever you're doing, you'll probably like the Demon Hunter. One of the most substantial serious content changes in Legion is Mythic plus dungeons, essentially removing challenge modes from the game. If you guys remember those from WoD and MoP, they're gone, and in place of them we have Mythic plus dungeons, a dungeon that you get a keystone for, and it kind of gets more difficult the higher keystone level you have. You always have a pretty decent amount of time to complete it, but at the end, if you do complete it, you get a few pieces of gear. It's obviously taken directly from the Diablo rifts and, you know, all that stuff, but it's actually really, 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 really effective in World of Warcraft. I'm surprised I haven't thought of it already. What it does is allows another content path outside of raiding. There hasn't really been one like this in the game for a very long time, maybe all the way back to BC. But yeah, you can essentially get very good gear just from these Mythic Plus dungeons, and they get considerably more challenging the harder you push yourself. So the higher level keystones, they actually add these affixes to them. It's global every week, but it is random. So for example, like say up to certain level, there's only the one affix, and then another level, there's the two affixes. That's the most it ever gets, is the two, but either way, the content gets harder, like a percentage of health and damage increases every time you go up a mythic level. But then there's also abilities, say like, you know, you tank deals 50 or 500% less threat, something like that, or all the overhealing you do creates a shield on the target that it has to be healed through in order to be able to heal them, stuff like that. Even though you're going to be doing these dungeons hundreds of times constantly, they're actually a little different every time with these different affixes. So I think a lot of what you're going to see from challenge mode mentality is going to cross over into Mythic Plus. Unfortunately, if you're not willing to think outside the box, I made a full video on how I think you should do Mythic Plus dungeons, like how you should prepare for them. But if you're not willing to think outside the box, like if you're only willing to play your class a certain way and not learn how to do dungeons properly, then this content is absolutely going to be useless for you, because you're just never going to be able to do it properly, just like in challenge modes. But either way, there's also some related changes that I want to talk about here. We're calling it Titanforging in general, gear changes. It goes along very well with dungeons in general, because now gear can upgrade as high as a global cap would allow. So for example, while the first tier of raid is out, that global cap may be 890, meaning that 5-mans that previously dropped, say 820 or whatever, can actually Titan Forge all the way up to 890. It's a very complicated process, but the math behind it essentially is it rolls for 5 level increments. If you win the roll, you get 5 item level. If you win it again, another 5. And you just have to win the roll constantly. The roll is obviously a set percentage variable that they can control. They could increase it if they want. They could decrease it if they want. But in general, this makes 5-mans actually a great source of gear, and especially now with Mythic Pluses. So you're aware, Mythic, like regular Mythic dungeons, are still in the game as well, but they have a weekly loot lockout just like they did previously. And then Mythic Plus dungeons, and you'll only be able to get 1 keystone a week, but you are able to do other people's keystones. So that means, you know, if your whole guild all gets, say, you know, you got a 5-man team you want to do these with, all 5 people get a keystone, well then guess what? You can do 5 Mythic Plus dungeons, and if you succeed in them, meaning you beat the timer and the dungeon, you know, you beat the dungeon before the timer runs out, then you can keep going until eventually you cannot beat the timer in the dungeon any further. But you get gear every time you actually kill the final boss. So this is a really good way to gear up, honestly. It's way better than raids in terms of distribution. But the difference is the raid gear is definitely higher and more potent. Gonna have the tier sets and the trinkets and all that kind of stuff. But you can get a lot of gear really quick through Mythic 5-man. So I think everybody should be considering this one of the changes that impacts the game the most. And I think it's probably my favorite change in any expansion since the beginning. Now it's time to talk about some PvP stuff. Admittedly, guys, this is not my main content focus, but I think I understand the changes enough to at least describe them. So if you guys have anything to add, please feel free. But we'll start with PvP templates and how gear works in PvP now. So if you guys haven't been following, what you need to understand is that they basically removed all PvP gear and how stats work inside instanced PvP. Everything still functions the same way out in the world, but of course there's no like serious PvP out in the world. It's just for fun, so that shouldn't really matter. What does matter though, however, is that every spec in the game has a template now. I'm not actually sure if you can actually find this template yourself, but regardless, everything is supposed to be more balanced. This is the goal with this system. I think the dream is very much an important part of progressing PvP, but I just don't think they'll succeed with it. What they're trying to do here is keep it so if a class or spec gets a little out of line because of changes to PvE, they could just temper them down in PvE and they'll keep them equatable. But since you can't choose your stats, it kind of takes a lot of the the player customization out of PvP, so you'll have to adapt to that. And then of course gearing in PvP now, what they're doing here is, since there is no gear anymore, it's just your item level is what increases the stats that you have, and it increases them uniformly. So no matter what the stats on your gear are, your stats will increase based on item level. The reward system now for PvP is simply just giving you PvE gear. This means that you can get the best quote-unquote PvP gear from anywhere. You can get it from Mythic 5-mans, you can get it from raids, or you could even get it from actual PvP. The higher PvP rating you have, the better the gear is item level wise. So that means that once again, you could actually just do PvP and get the best item level gear in the game, presumably. Yeah, so you wouldn't even have to raid or do mythic dungeons if you wanted to get really good gear. So I think that's a great plus as well. But in general, you know, the stat changes, the way they're trying to balance things, the way gear works now, since, you know, the gear, the item level you have, it kind of like increments only a little bit. So, you know, even I guess the difference between the lowest gear possible and the highest gear possible is very minimal. I can't really say for sure. I don't know. That's what they said is going to happen. But I think all these changes together are a real big step in the right direction. But unfortunately, I don't think they're going to succeed with the first step, right? You always fall on your first step. So I think this is a great progressive move for PvP. I think this is really going to help balancing a competitive situation PvP. I know they've been putting a lot of money into competitive like tournaments and hosting all that and stuff like that. So this is a really important time for PvP in WoW. I frankly have always looked at it as second fiddle to the rest of the game. But if they are managing to make balance proper, then this could be a really big step going forward for competitive PvP in all of World of Warcraft. And on top of the PvP templates, we also have PvP honor changes. This is another really big topic. If you ask me, I think probably the greater of the two topics for the game's health overall. What this does is hopefully attract new people to PvP because of all different achievements and the prestige system and the talents in general. Essentially what they've done here is they've added a PvP talent tree that instead of, you know, how you used to get honor and stuff like that, now that contributes as experience towards this PvP talent tree. Once you've gotten your full talent tree filled out, you'll be able to then cash in all your honor and do a prestige where you do this all again, being rewarded by some like cosmetic things, I guess. But I think there's also some actual PvP functionality to it. I can't say for sure. But regardless, it's a really, really, really cool system. It makes PvP, like just, you know, random battlegrounds and stuff, feel like they have a lot more of a purpose now. It should be a lot more fun too. And I think this is a direct response to everybody saying like they like the honor system in Classic much better than they do now. This is basically the same thing. You know, you're just going and PvPing, you just get honor. You know, the best honor gains obviously will be calculated out, but regardless, you'll always be able to get honor and always be able to increase until, you know, the maximum prestige. So I think the ultimate incentive here is that a lot more people will be doing PvP, people who previously never considered it. Now, maybe this kind of hurts the PvP community overall, waters it down, but I think serious PvP will still have a great place. But this kind of gets more people into random battlegrounds, just, you know, kind of general low-level PvP. And it just really answers the cry for the classic honor system back. I think it did actually work pretty well. It was kind of like rudimentary at the time, and this really helps flesh it out now that they have proper balancing and gear is, you know, a lot less important for PvP. So in general, I think this is probably one of the most progressive changes they could make for PvP. It's a really, like, these two things together, the two things I just spoke about, are really going to change PvP greatly. So if anything, if you're serious about PvP or you just want to try to get into it, I think now is definitely the time. I would be remiss if I did not bring up the flying situation in Legion, since for some reason a lot of people are really passionate about travel in this video game. But once again, you will not be able to fly at launch. This time they've planned it out a little bit better. There's actually an achievement that is pretty much akin to how it worked in WoD. You'll be able to start that in the first patch. It's kind of just, you know, do all the stuff that you did like in the previous expansion. But this time you actually get bonus speed to your ground mounts, which is actually really, really useful. It's a very nice concession made. And on top of that, before you can get too started in the expansion, you need to make sure you have all the reps at friendly, or I guess it's honored, one way or the other. You need to have done all the zones before you can start world quests. And when you do all the zones and unlock world quests, you get this whistle. Now, it's a 5-minute CD, and when you blow it, it picks you up and takes you to the nearest flight path. Don't forget, all the flight paths are the new model. Like, they've increased dramatically in speed and precision since Warlords of Draenor, so they are actually really fast. Traveling around on a flight path is really efficient. Of course, it is not flying around on your mount, but I would like to remind everybody who, for some reason, I'm sure there's going to be somebody who's like, I'm not going to play this game, not going to buy this game because of flying. What we're talking about here, guys, is travel, okay? Everything in the game takes place in an instance. Now, of course, in the world quests, this is a big deal because, you know, traveling to them may be part of it. But what you really need to remember here is now, especially with world quests, simply flying to the objective of the world quest really defeats the purpose of making the world more active. You guys understand what I mean? Like, if you can literally just fly over all the stuff between you and the objective of the world quest, yeah, I just don't understand why you would want to do that. I like to play this game for a lot of reasons, but I think I understand why Blizzard would want this. It makes it a lot more realistic. I think a lot more applicable for a lot of players. If you're trying to create content in the world, you really need to actually be able to see that content and, you know, navigate around it properly. So while I totally would love to have flying in the game, I am completely understanding why Blizzard wants to hold it back. And like I said, I think they've given really great concessions. This whistle is, you guys really don't understand how cool this whistle is. And then, of course, the actual achievement can be started now. So probably like maybe 7.2 or maybe even 7.4. We'll see actual flying in the game, but until then, just get used to the ground. I think you'll value the game a lot higher when you realize how great a lot of the zone is. You want to actually see it like this properly. A lot of the treasure systems would be completely invalidated with flying, so they need to keep that relevant. And I think it's just healthier for the world. You know, if they're trying to establish the world this way. So. And then a final point that I want to bring up here is upcoming patches. Now, obviously, 7.1 is not in development yet currently, at least not public development, but we do know a little bit about it. They're talking about things like expanded social features, a giant dungeon of some sort, and obviously a lot of class changes, you know, class balancing, stuff like that. But, you know, in the future, they also discuss 7.2 and another raid after that in 7.4, following the mob style, right? So immediately up from WoD. Now, these things aren't happening yet. They haven't happened, so we can't be 100% sure. Like, if anything, I could see the final raid getting cut or the middle raid getting cut and the final raid being replacing it, you know? So if there was to be a big fault with Legion, I could see that being it. It seems to be the most logical because basically everything else they've already said is in the game. So it would have to be a fault with their patches. Now, if they do fail with the patches, I'm going to have to say that, you know, Legion is a great launch expansion. But of course, without patch content, this content is going to be very easily cannibalized. Even though all of it is really, you know, really diverse and there's a lot to do, once you've kind of exceeded its reach, there's no reason to go back to it. Even artifact power. I think artifact power is probably like has the most longevity out of all these changes. But once you have your max artifact, if they don't add anything else for artifacts, then that's it. You're done. And, you know, you have the order hall maxed out. You have your artifact maxed out. You have very good gear. Then even world quests are over, you know? So unless they expand on the systems, there's really not much to keep us doing this content on our mains. But I definitely think this is going to be a great expansion for alts because of how, you know, readily available gear is going to be and how great Mythic Plus progression is going to be. So there's a lot to think about there, and hopefully further patches expand on this. But if they do a 3-raid expansion with multiple tiers of content and multiple patches in between it with smaller content, I definitely think this is going to be probably the best expansion ever. But let's talk about that in a summary of points, and of course also talk about, you know, why you should not buy the expansion. So now that we've gone over all the major content, let's talk about how this summarizes and whether or not you or anybody in general should buy or should not buy the expansion. So the way I look at it is WoD has been fully addressed with almost everything in Legion. A lot of it is a direct response and almost makes you wonder if they left it out of WoD because it was supposed to be in WoD, but it wasn't ready, and then they had to push it back to Legion. I really think, you know, all the complaints with WoD, my main complaints were, of course, the garrisons just being like way too, you just were stuck in them. There was hardly any, there's so much that could be gained from them. And then, of course, there was no really compelling world content. Outside of that, the raids and dungeons were good, but in general, like, just the game itself was very lackluster. There was very little going on with reputations, very little going on elsewhere in the world. And I didn't feel like PvP had much innovation, especially compared to Legion. So when examining all of these features, it's pretty obvious to me that this expansion has the potential to be the best one ever. Try to hold your nostalgia aside. I know this is a controversial statement, but yeah, if you think back on actual additions to older expansions like the first few, you can compare them side by side to Legion and realize that there is a lot to be gained here. Now, of course, there are a lot of things that people are upset about. Things like the camera change, which really isn't part of the expansion but has happened. Class changes, people think like, oh, they ruined my class, etc. Other things like the order hall not being very fun for them, or the mission table being a bad decision. These are all things that you have to put in perspective. They don't really affect the game too much. Obviously, class changes could ruin your playstyle, but I would just urge you to play, try something new. Maybe you'll love it, but either way, I think the actual content, the actual features of the expansion are the best that any expansion has ever delivered. So if you're somebody who plays the game seriously or has in the past, I think this would be a really good expansion for anybody in that boat. Now, should you buy the expansion? All right, let's talk about why this varies from person to person. For me, I've been playing World of Warcraft since the day the game came out. I've always enjoyed it to some degree, and I will always enjoy it to some degree. No matter how bad WoD or Cataclysm were for me, I still played them and still enjoyed them. I retained a sub through the entirety of them. The thing that keeps me going is a fun, friendly guild that I have established at the start of Wrath of the Lich King. So almost 8 years now, I've been playing with these people, and no matter what the game offers me, I will never quit. A lot of people are not in this boat, so should you buy Legion? If you have not bought previous expansions, then no, I will say no. There's no reason to come back to the game at this point that weren't present in the previous expansions, especially at launch. Launch is always the most hype time, so if you didn't enjoy or weren't hyped for previous expansions, then I just don't think World of Warcraft is for you. The game has evolved to a state now where serious play is really all there is to do. Especially with Warlords of Draenor, but now even going into Legion, you really need to actually want to progress your character. If you just want to log on and jump around and do quests and stuff like that, then there's really no point in buying any expansion, let alone this one especially. You're just going to be overwhelmed. There's going to look like there's too much to do, and you're quickly going to burn yourself out. What about somebody who played WoD, hated it, and wants to come back for Legion? Well, it depends why you hated WoD. If you blindly hated it because you heard everybody else say it was shit, then don't ever play the game again. You're a waste of the subscription number, you're not helping the game, and you're just basically bogging down everyone else. But if you played Warlords of Draenor and you were really disappointed by the lack of world content, the focus of the garrison, etc., then I think Legion completely answers that. So it may be time to give it another shot. But once again, I will say this. If you've quit WoW in the past, you will quit WoW again in the future. For me, somebody who has constantly rated and progressed my character every single week, if not almost every single day, then there is literally no point in ever quitting. The game has way too much to do in it. I don't care what expansion we're talking about. We're still playing World of Warcraft, guys. There's still millions of achievement points to be gained, millions of things to do, just an inexhaustible resource list that you can go through, okay? You can never do everything in this game. It's literally not possible. But a lot of people just like to focus on one or two things, and then they kind of get sick of it. So either way, I think Legion is going to have the most launch content ever. I think the patches that they're promising have really great examples of this, but we'll see. They still have to happen, obviously. So at least on launch, you're going to have, I'd say at least 3-4 months of constant content to do. Just getting your artifact maxed out will be the biggest thing that will consume a lot of time. And then, of course, gearing up through Mythic Pluses and raids should always be good. And now that they're staggering the raid launch a little bit there, I think for at least the first patch, 7.0 to 7.2, will be a really, really, really good time for WoW. So if you're serious about playing the game and you want to make friends and you want to play, the game with them and you want to enjoy the time with them, then Legion is definitely going to be the best expansion ever for that. There's so much stuff that you can do together. It's unreal. But if you're just going to come back and you're going to be antisocial and you're not going to try to do anything the game has to offer that's challenging, like Mythic Plus dungeons or Mythic rating, or even trying to push for achievements or professions or anything like that, then yeah, it's the same game. It's never going to change for you because you just don't have the right mindset, which of course is fine. Everybody plays games differently. So thanks for watching. If you guys actually made it this far, man, congratulations. It's a long video, but I wanted to make sure I was feature complete in this coverage. So if you have any questions about any of this stuff, I am more than happy to answer them. But otherwise, I hope you guys enjoy Legion if you do indeed buy it. If you don't, I'd love to hear why. I'd love to hear, your valid reasons behind it. But otherwise, that's everything for me. So see you guys in the next video.